Have you ever shared an idea so different that people looked at you like you had lost your mind? They smiled politely, exchanged glances, maybe even laughed after you walked away. In that moment, it felt like the world had already decided your future. Not because your idea lacked value, but because it challenged everything they believed was possible. History has always treated visionaries this way. Every breakthrough was once called impossible. Every revolution began as someone's crazy thought. The painful truth is that people rarely reject an idea because it's wrong. They reject it because it forces them to question the limits they've accepted for themselves. Tonight, you're going to discover why being misunderstood is often the first sign that you're thinking ahead of your time, and why the very people who doubted you may soon become the ones asking how you did it. Before we begin, if you're someone who believes in growth, resilience, and unlocking your true potential, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. These videos are created to help you think differently, act boldly, and become impossible to ignore. Now, let's dive into the psychology behind why your crazy idea might be your greatest advantage. There is a strange pattern hidden inside almost every remarkable success story. It begins long before the applause, long before the headlines, the promotions, or the recognition. It begins with silence. The kind of silence that fills a room after someone says something nobody expected to hear. The kind that makes people shift in their seats, because they cannot decide whether they just witnessed brilliance or complete nonsense. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid that silence. They learned very early that fitting in feels safer than standing out. As children, we're rewarded for giving the expected answer instead of asking uncomfortable questions. At school, we're taught to memorize instead of imagine. At work, we're encouraged to improve the system rather than redesign it. Slowly, without realizing it, we begin measuring intelligence by agreement instead of originality. That's why when someone finally speaks from genuine conviction instead of social approval, the reaction is almost always resistance. Imagine a room filled with people who have solved the same problem the same way for years. They have built careers around routines. Their confidence comes from familiarity. Then one person quietly suggests an entirely different approach. Suddenly the conversation changes. It isn't just about the idea anymore. It becomes about identity. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. When people encounter information that threatens what they already believe, the brain experiences discomfort. Instead of changing their beliefs, many people instinctively attack the new information. It's emotionally easier to call someone unrealistic than to admit your own thinking might be outdated. That is why your boldest ideas often receive the harshest criticism before they receive any praise. The interesting part is that criticism rarely reflects the quality of your idea. More often, it reflects the emotional state of the person hearing it. Someone trapped in fear will see danger where you see opportunity. Someone attached to routine will see chaos where you see innovation. Someone who has already given up on their own dreams will see your ambition as arrogance. Their reaction tells you far more about their inner world than it does about yours. Think about every invention that changed civilization. Electricity was considered dangerous nonsense. The automobile was dismissed as an expensive toy. Personal computers were called unnecessary. The internet was mocked by experts who believed nobody would ever need it. Every generation laughs at tomorrow before depending on it. Human beings are wired to trust familiarity because, for thousands of years, survival depended on predictable patterns. Anything unfamiliar could mean danger. Although society has evolved, our brains still carry traces of that ancient programming. That's why new ideas often feel emotionally wrong before they make logical sense. Understanding this changes everything. Instead of interpreting rejection as proof that you're failing, you begin seeing it as evidence that you're introducing something people haven't emotionally processed yet. The people who change industries rarely start by convincing everyone. They start by convincing themselves. Confidence is often misunderstood as believing you'll succeed. Real confidence is continuing despite not knowing. It's the willingness to move while certainty hasn't arrived yet. That is what separates visionaries from spectators. Spectators wait for evidence before believing. Visionaries create the evidence everyone else was waiting for. Unfortunately, this stage is where most dreams die, not because they lack potential, because they lack protection. An idea is fragile during its earliest stages. Before results exist, it survives only through belief. Every sarcastic comment, every dismissive laugh, every warning disguised as advice slowly chips away at its foundation. Eventually, many people abandon extraordinary futures simply because ordinary opinions became louder than their own intuition. But intuition is fascinating. Research suggests our subconscious mind recognizes patterns long before our conscious mind explains them. Sometimes you feel pulled toward something that makes no logical sense today because your brain has quietly connected information you haven't fully understood yet. That's why some of your best ideas seem impossible to explain at first. You feel them before you can defend them. Most people mistake that uncertainty for weakness. In reality, it's often the birthplace of originality. Look closely at successful entrepreneurs, artists, scientists, and creators. Nearly all of them describe a period where almost nobody understood what they were building. Friends questioned them. Family worried. Experts doubted them. Investors walked away. The world called them unrealistic, until one day, reality caught up, and suddenly the same idea that sounded ridiculous became obvious. People love certainty after someone else creates it, but almost nobody volunteers to live through uncertainty first. That's the hidden cost of originality. You don't simply build an idea. You build emotional endurance. You learn to trust your vision while receiving very little external validation. You become comfortable looking foolish before looking successful. That psychological transformation is far more valuable than the idea itself, because once you master that mindset, no amount of temporary rejection can stop you. Still, one question remains. If history repeatedly proves that today's impossible ideas become tomorrow's breakthroughs, why do intelligent people continue rejecting them over and over again? The answer has almost nothing to do with intelligence, and everything to do with the hidden fears controlling human behavior. There is something far more dangerous than a bad idea. It is a good idea that arrives before people are emotionally ready to accept it. That's the hidden reason so many visionaries spend years feeling misunderstood. Their challenge isn't convincing people that something can work. Their challenge is helping people let go of what has always felt safe. Think about the last time someone challenged one of your strongest beliefs. Maybe it was about your career, your relationships, your health, or your future. Chances are your first reaction wasn't curiosity, it was resistance. Not because you were closed-minded, but because your brain was trying to protect your identity. Human beings don't just defend opinions. We defend the version of ourselves built around those opinions. When your idea enters a room, it doesn't simply compete with other ideas. It competes with people's identities. Imagine someone who has spent 20 years becoming an expert in one way of doing things. Their confidence, reputation, and even self-worth are connected to that system. Then you quietly present a method that's faster, simpler, and more effective. To you, it's innovation. To them, it feels like erasure. This is why revolutionary ideas often receive emotional reactions instead of logical discussions. People believe they're evaluating your idea. In reality, they're protecting themselves. The brain constantly asks one invisible question. If this new idea is true, what does it say about everything I've believed until now? That question is terrifying, because accepting a new truth often requires grieving an old identity. Most people would rather reject reality than rebuild themselves. It's one of the deepest psychological patterns in human behavior. You see it everywhere. Someone stays in a miserable job because leaving would force them to admit they spent years climbing the wrong ladder. Someone remains in an unhealthy relationship because walking away would mean accepting they ignored warning signs for far too long. Someone laughs at ambitious people because believing success is possible would expose every excuse they've been using to stay comfortable. Your idea becomes dangerous the moment it exposes another person's comfort zone. That explains something many people never understand. Criticism is not always opposition. Sometimes it's fear wearing the mask of certainty. Notice how the loudest critics are often the least curious people in the room. Curious people ask questions. Fearful people make conclusions. One wants to understand. The other wants to escape discomfort. The difference changes everything. This is why emotional intelligence is more valuable than raw intelligence. Raw intelligence creates ideas. Emotional intelligence knows how people will react to them. If you only understand logic, rejection feels personal. If you understand psychology, rejection becomes predictable. Suddenly the laughter doesn't sting as much. The dismissive comments lose their power, because you realize something incredible. They are not fighting your future. They are fighting their past. That realization gives you an enormous advantage. Instead of wasting energy trying to convince everyone, you become selective. You stop asking for permission from people who are emotionally invested in saying no. Not everyone deserves early access to your vision. Seeds don't become trees overnight. They need darkness before sunlight, protection before exposure. Your biggest dreams deserve the same treatment. One of the greatest mistakes ambitious people make is announcing every new idea before it has roots. They mistake attention for support. But attention attracts opinions, and opinions can destroy confidence before results ever have a chance to appear. Sometimes silence is not insecurity. Sometimes silence is strategy. The strongest builders often work quietly because they understand a simple truth. Results create believers faster than explanations ever will. Think about an architect. Nobody praises the blueprint while it's still covered in sketches. People celebrate the building after it's standing. The same principle applies to your dreams. Your responsibility is not to convince the crowd. Your responsibility is to keep building while the crowd is distracted. Eventually, reality becomes your loudest argument. The most successful people rarely spend their lives defending themselves. They invest that energy into creating undeniable proof. Proof has a unique psychological effect. Opinions disappear when evidence arrives. The same people who questioned your vision begin saying they always knew you would succeed. The same critics who laughed start asking for advice. The same doubters suddenly call you lucky. But luck is often just invisible preparation finally becoming visible. For years, they only saw your failures. They never saw the mornings you worked while everyone slept. They never saw the evenings you spent learning while others relaxed. They never saw the loneliness of believing in something nobody else could imagine. Success looks sudden only to those who weren't paying attention. That's why resilience matters more than brilliance. A brilliant idea without persistence becomes forgotten. An average idea pursued with relentless consistency often changes lives. The greatest breakthroughs are rarely one giant leap. They are thousands of invisible decisions made when nobody is watching. Decision after decision, day after day, failure after failure, improvement after improvement. Eventually, something remarkable happens. Your confidence no longer depends on applause. You stop measuring progress by compliments. You begin trusting evidence only you can see. That is one of the most powerful psychological transformations a human being can experience. External validation slowly loses its grip. Internal conviction becomes your foundation. Ironically, that's often the exact moment the world finally starts believing in you. Because confidence is contagious. Not loud confidence, not arrogance, quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't beg for approval. The kind that keeps moving regardless of who's watching. People are naturally drawn to certainty. Not because certainty guarantees success. Because certainty creates emotional safety. When they see you refusing to quit despite rejection, something unexpected happens inside them. Part of them begins wondering, what if they were right all along? That single question changes everything. Once doubt enters the mind of your critics, the balance begins to shift. Slowly, the impossible starts looking possible. The ridiculous starts looking visionary. The crazy idea starts looking inevitable. But that transformation comes with one final psychological test. Because proving everyone wrong isn't actually the hardest part. The hardest part begins after they finally admit you were right. There comes a moment in every remarkable journey when something strange begins to happen. It isn't the success itself that surprises you, it's the people. The same voices that once questioned your judgment suddenly start speaking your name with admiration. The same people who warned you not to take the risk begin telling others they always believed in you. Those who once kept their distance now look for opportunities to stand beside you. At first, it feels confusing. You wonder if people have changed. But the truth is simpler than that. They haven't changed nearly as much as their perception of you has. Human beings are deeply influenced by visible evidence. Before results exist, people judge your potential. After results appear, they judge your achievements. Potential is invisible. Achievement is undeniable. That is why society often celebrates people years after refusing to support them. Think about the entrepreneur who spent years hearing, "You should get a real job." The athlete who was told to stop chasing impossible dreams. The artist whose work was ignored. The scientist whose theories were mocked. The inventor everyone called unrealistic. Almost every extraordinary person lived through a season where belief was lonely. Not because they lacked talent. Because results had not yet become visible. People don't usually invest in uncertainty. They invest in certainty disguised as confidence. That realization changes how you interpret the opinions around you. You stop expecting universal support. You understand that most people aren't visionaries, they're observers. Observers wait for proof. Visionaries create it. This is why the path often feels lonely. Not because you're abandoned, because you're walking towards something that hasn't become obvious yet. There's another psychological principle quietly shaping these moments. It's called social proof. Human beings naturally assume something has value when they see others valuing it. The restaurant with a line outside suddenly seems better. The book everyone recommends becomes more attractive. The company everyone admires attracts even more attention. Success creates momentum because people trust crowds more than intuition. Ironically, once your idea begins succeeding, people who never believed in it suddenly become interested. Not because they understand it better, because other people finally believe in it too. The crowd gives them permission. This explains one of the strangest experiences successful people describe. Nothing about their work changes overnight, only the world's perception does. Yesterday they were ignored. Today they're called a genius. Yesterday they were unrealistic. Today they're inspirational. Yesterday they were too ambitious. Today they're ahead of their time. The person didn't suddenly become extraordinary. The evidence simply became impossible to ignore. This is why you must never let public opinion become your compass. Public opinion follows results. It rarely predicts them. If you rely on applause to decide your direction, you'll constantly change course. But if you rely on purpose, something different happens. You become stable, calm, focused, unshaken by temporary reactions. That stability becomes one of your greatest strengths. Because success isn't just about reaching a goal. It's about becoming the kind of person who can keep moving whether people clap or criticize. Unfortunately, success also reveals another side of human nature. Not everyone celebrates your growth. Some people become uncomfortable. Not because you've harmed them, because your progress quietly reminds them of their own unfulfilled potential. Comparison is one of the oldest emotional traps in human psychology. People rarely compare themselves with those behind them. They compare themselves with those ahead of them. When your life begins expanding, some people feel inspired. Others feel threatened. The difference isn't your success. It's their mindset. A person who believes growth is possible sees your achievements as evidence. A person trapped in scarcity sees your achievements as competition. The same success creates two completely different emotional reactions. This is why you'll notice relationships changing. Some friends grow closer. Others slowly disappear. Neither response should surprise you. Growth naturally creates separation. Not because success changes your heart, because it changes your priorities. You begin protecting your time, your energy, your focus. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You stop apologizing for having ambition. And people who benefited from your old version may struggle to understand your new one. That doesn't make them bad people. It simply means they're attached to who you used to be. But you cannot build tomorrow while living inside yesterday's expectations. Every meaningful transformation requires leaving something behind. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes it's relationships that only survived while you stayed small. This isn't cruelty, it's evolution. A butterfly doesn't apologize because it can no longer crawl like a caterpillar. Growth changes what fits. One of the greatest psychological mistakes people make after achieving success is trying to convince everyone they deserve it. They over-explain, they defend themselves. They seek acceptance from people who already decided who they were years ago. But real confidence doesn't argue, it continues. You don't need to rewrite someone's opinion. You only need to keep writing your story. Eventually, reality becomes impossible to debate. The quietest victories often create the loudest impact. There's another lesson hidden here. Success should never become revenge. If your entire purpose is proving people wrong, you'll eventually feel empty. Because once you've proven them wrong, then what? Real fulfillment comes from proving yourself right. From becoming the person your younger self hoped you could become. From waking up knowing you honored your own potential. That kind of success cannot be taken away. It doesn't depend on applause. It doesn't disappear when trends change. It becomes part of who you are. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop chasing validation, validation starts chasing you. People begin asking how you stayed so focused, how you ignored the criticism, how you kept believing. They assume you discovered some secret strategy. But the truth is much simpler. You stopped asking the world whether your dream was possible. You started asking yourself whether you were willing to work for it. That single shift changes everything. Because the most powerful people are not those who never experience doubt. They're the ones who refuse to let doubt become their identity. And just when it feels like you've finally arrived, life presents one final lesson. Because proving everyone wrong is impressive, but learning what to do after you've won is what truly defines the rest of your life. Eventually, something happens that no one prepares you for. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself with applause. There is no dramatic moment where the world suddenly stops and admits you were right. Instead, it arrives quietly. One ordinary morning, you wake up and realize something has changed. Not around you, inside you. The opinions that once echoed endlessly in your mind have become distant whispers. The fear of being misunderstood has lost its grip. The need to explain yourself has disappeared. Without even noticing, you've crossed an invisible line. You are no longer building your life to prove people wrong. You're building it because you've finally become the person you promised yourself you would be. And that changes everything. Most people believe the greatest victory is external. The promotion, the successful business, the recognition, the wealth, the influence. But psychology tells a different story. Research consistently shows that external success creates only temporary happiness. The human mind quickly adapts. Yesterday's dream becomes today's normal. Then another goal appears, and another. This is called hedonic adaptation. It's one of the reasons people spend their entire lives chasing milestones that never fully satisfy them. The finish line keeps moving, unless something deeper changes. The people who experience lasting fulfillment are rarely those who achieve the most. They're the ones who become the most. They understand that success is not an event. It's an identity. It isn't something you occasionally experience. It's someone you continuously become. Think back to the person you were before you shared that crazy idea. Remember how carefully you measured every word. How often you wondered what people would think. How easily one negative opinion could steal an entire day's confidence. Now compare that version of yourself with who you are becoming. You no longer need permission. You no longer wait for approval before taking action. You no longer confuse criticism with truth. That transformation is the real miracle, because ideas can fail. Businesses can collapse, careers can change, money can disappear. But once you develop unshakable character, no setback can permanently defeat you. Life has a fascinating way of testing this lesson again and again. Just when you become comfortable, another impossible challenge appears. Another dream, another opportunity, another idea that everyone says will never work. Years ago, you might have listened. Today you smile. Not because you're certain you'll succeed, because you've learned something far more valuable. You've learned that uncertainty is no longer your enemy. It's your invitation. The people who change the world are not fearless. They're simply more committed to possibility than they are attached to certainty. That's the hidden difference. Fear still visits them. Doubt still knocks on the door. Failure still happens. But none of those things get to make the final decision. They've built a stronger voice inside themselves. A voice that quietly says, keep going. When everyone else stops, keep learning. When everyone else settles, keep believing. When everyone else forgets why they started, that voice becomes your greatest advantage. Not intelligence, not talent, not luck. Consistency. The willingness to continue after excitement fades. Because excitement starts journeys. Discipline finishes them. There's another truth very few people talk about. The world doesn't actually need more people who fit in. It needs more people willing to think independently. Every major advancement in history came from someone who was willing to tolerate temporary misunderstanding for the sake of long-term progress. The world moved forward because someone refused to stop asking questions, refused to stop imagining, refused to stop building. What if the next breakthrough belongs to someone watching this video right now? What if the idea is sitting quietly in your notebook? The business you've been afraid to start, the book you've delayed writing, the invention you've been secretly imagining, the conversation you've been avoiding, the life you've convinced yourself is unrealistic. What if that's exactly the thing you're supposed to pursue? Not because success is guaranteed, but because you'll never forgive yourself if you spend your entire life wondering, what if? Regret is heavier than failure. Failure teaches, regret haunts. Years from now, people probably won't remember every obstacle you faced. They won't remember every critic, every sarcastic comment, every rejection. Even you won't remember most of them, but you'll remember one thing. Whether you had the courage to stay loyal to your own vision. Because at the end of life, very few people wish they had played smaller. Very few wish they had worried more about fitting in. Very few wish they had ignored more opportunities. Most wish they had trusted themselves sooner. The greatest tragedy isn't having a crazy idea. It's abandoning it because ordinary people couldn't imagine extraordinary outcomes. Remember this, every masterpiece begins as something incomplete. Every movement begins with one believer. Every revolution begins with one uncomfortable question. Every legend begins with someone willing to hear the words, "That will never work," and keep going anyway. So if people laughed at your vision, let them. If they underestimated your potential, let them. If they couldn't see what you saw, that's okay. They were never supposed to see it first. You were. Because vision always belongs to the one willing to imagine tomorrow before everyone else can recognize it. One day your results may silence every doubt. But by then, you'll discover you no longer need the silence. You'll be too busy building the next impossible dream. And that's the beautiful irony. The greatest victory was never proving everyone wrong. The greatest victory was becoming someone who no longer needed to. Thank you for spending these moments with us. If this story challenged the way you think and reminded you to trust your own vision, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who's been doubting themselves. You never know. Your share might be the encouragement that helps someone protect the very idea that changes their life forever.